Now you could say,
welcome to Northern Light Spiritual Center. Northern Light Spiritual Center is a community of people dedicated to using spiritual and practical principles to create lives we want to live. Excellent. Northern Light Spiritual Center offers spiritual and practical tools to make positive changes in our lives. Yay! We at Northern Light Spiritual Center acknowledge our presence here on the traditional and unceded lands of the first people of Seattle, the Duwamish and coastal Salish peoples. These people are still here, and we join with them in how they continue to honor and bring to light their ancient heritage. We seek to resist the erasure of indigenous histories as we work towards honoring and inviting the truth. Please join me for our opening song, In This Very Room, by Ron and Carol Harris. And we're going to go through it twice because Cheryl is here. In this very room, there's quite enough love for all the world. And in this very room, there's quite enough joy for all the world. And there's quite enough peace and quite enough power to walk through our every fear. For Spirit, sweet Spirit, is in this very room. In this very room, there's quite enough love for all the world. And in this very room, there's quite enough joy for all the world. And there's quite enough peace and quite enough power to walk through our every fear. For Spirit, sweet Spirit, is in this very room. In this very room. Good morning.
Good morning.
good morning. This is the time of our service where we set aside for a brief meditation. A time where you can center yourself and release all that has come before this moment. Releasing any worries, woes, any little things that are niggling at you, and just be present. Be present to yourself and to the divine within. And so I suggest that you find a comfortable spot to get as comfortable as you possibly can. And allow yourself to take in, we're going to take in 3 deep, cleansing, feeding breaths. So we can breathe in and release. Another breath in and release. One more breath in and release. your body is relaxing and at ease. I invite us to go back in our lives, it could be anywhere, where you had a dream. Not a dream necessarily that you had at night, but a dream of what you wanted your life to look like. A dream of what you wanted to aspire to. A dream of what you wanted to accomplish, what you wanted to be, what you wanted to do in this life. There could be many dreams, because as we move along in time, our dreams change. And so as our dreams change, we change. So just allow yourself to go back and pick out a dream or two and see if that dream has come true, if it has manifested in your life. And how does that feel? How does it feel to have manifested a dream? And if this dream did not manifest or come to be, was there another dream that replaced it? For some unknown reason. Was there something else that replaced the first dream? As you wrap this up, sometimes dreams do not always come out the way we dreamt them, how we thought they should be. A lot of times, they come out much better, and bigger, and more beautiful. And so just remember that you can always dream, and there's nothing wrong with dreaming. To dream big. Just be open to the idea that it may be better and greater than you can ever imagine. And so I just invite you to open your eyes and maybe wiggle your fingers and toes and come back to the space that you're in. And just remember to dream. And so it is. And now is our reading for today. It comes from the Bible Study Magazine, an author named Eli T. Evans. The Hebrew prophet Elijah suffers a faith crisis after defeating the priest of Vaughan, exiling himself to a lovely cave in the wilderness. He bitterly laments the loneliness that came from devoting himself to Yahweh. Fortunately, Elijah hears from Yahweh that others remain, including his immediate successor, Elisha. Elisha's call gives us the idiom, take up the mantle, which means to pass an office from mentor to student. Elijah's cloak revealed anointing of the prophet's office. This cloak was probably a wide, fur-wrapped, suitable for traveling on foot in the hot sun and sleeping outside on the cold desert nights. The hairy robe is distinctive enough that King Ahab recognizes Elijah from its description alone. By the time of Zechariah, such a robe has become characteristic of prophets. When John the Baptist begins his wilderness ministry, he adopts a similar costume. It seems Elijah set the trend. Early prophets such as Samuel wore a more common robe of the same general cut as the priests and Levites. Elijah's cloak must have been quite ragged, considering the prophet's outdoor lifestyle, but it would have given him a certain air of nobility. The cloak symbolizes the paradox of prophetic office, equal parts earthly poverty and heavenly power. That Elijah was soon passed to his pupil Elisha hesitates at the call, which does not reveal a failure of character, but rather the recognition of an enormity of the task. He's in good company. Moses and Jeremiah complained of their inability to speak. Isaiah demurs because of unclean lips. Samuel hears the Lord but doesn't know who he is. And Jonah simply runs away. Unlike these people, Elisha is not called by God directly, but by his earthly predecessors, while God appoints him by his name. Elijah does the actual calling. Elijah's request to kiss his mother and father, getting his affairs in order before leaving his former life behind, shouldn't cast doubt on his commitment. He sacrifices his team of oxen literally laying down his livelihood to take up the life of an itinerant prophet. Elisha proves his devotion. The two prophets crossed the Jordan River on dry ground. From city to city, Elisha presses on with his master, unfazed by Elisha's repeated instructions to turn back. Ultimately, the office is not transferred when Elisha casts the mantle, but when Elijah casts the mantle, but Elisha picks it up from the ground as Elijah is whisked to heaven. Elisha becomes a student who surpasses his master. He asks for a double portion of the spirit Elijah had, and indeed he performs twice as many miracles. The miracles of Elisha demonstrate God's control over all nature, war, food, and the cycles of plenty and scarcity, disease, and even birth and death itself. After such a long and miraculous career, we might expect Elisha to get carried into heaven like Elijah. But the fiery chariots and horsemen that took Elijah up, and which Elisha had seen defending Israel, were not present at his death. Joash, the king of Israel, underscores this irony of Elisha's deathbed by repeating word for word the lament Elisha originally cried over Elijah. My father, the chariots of Israel and the horsemen. The message, God reigns, not the prophets. So Elisha peers out at us from beneath his mentor's hairy cloak, the student who surpassed the mentor. And so it is.
Wow.
I was just saying, and so it is.
Yes. That was quite the Elijah tongue twister. I might say. Yeah, I did say. Okay,
Okay, you do know that each month I come up with a different chant. So this is the chant for this month. There's only so much I can do on my own. There's only so far I can go. There's only so much I can finish alone. There's only this much I can know. I'm so much more when I work together with others. I'm so much more when I dance on the floor with others. I'm so much more when I sing the score with others. I'm so much more with others. And then, of course, second round will be you're so much more. Third round is we're so much more. And then we come back to I, so that each one of us are feeling it. There's only so much I can do on my own. There's only so far I can go. There's only this much I can finish alone. There's only this much I can know. I'm so much more when I work together with others. I'm so much more when I dance on the floor with others. I'm so much more when I sing my score with others. I'm so much more with others. Now you. There's only so much you can do on your own. There's only so far you can go. There's only this much you can finish alone. There's only this much you can know. much more when you work together with others. You're so much more when you dance on the floor with others. You're so much more when you sing the score with others. You're so much more with others. Now there's only so much we can do on our own. There's only this far we can go. There's only this much we can finish alone. There's only this much we can know. We're so much more when we work together with others. We're so much more when we dance on the floor with others. We're so much more when we sing the score with others. We're so much more with others. And that's I. There's only so much I can do on my own. There's only so far I can go. There's only this much I can finish alone. There's only this much I can know. I'm so much more when I work together with others. I'm so much more when I dance on the floor with others. I'm so much more when I sing the score with others. I'm so much more with others. You.
A dream is a wish your heart makes when you're fast asleep. In dreams you will lose your heartache. Whatever you wish for, you keep. Have faith in your dreams. On someday your rainbow will come smiling through. No matter how your heart is grieving, if you keep on believing, the dream that you wish will come true.
So I chose that song, "A Dream Is a Wish Your Heart Make," because it's kind of instilled in me. I saw Cinderella at a very young age, and so whenever I think about dreams, that one comes through. Partly because the story of Cinderella really embodies what it is to dream. Here's a girl who started off with a pretty good life. She had a father who loved her, and then her mother passed away. and then her father raised her on his own for a while, and things were going pretty well. And then he thought, well, I should probably get another woman into the picture. So he married another woman who had 2 of her own daughters from a previous relationship, and it looked okay. He was a merchant, and he went away, and on his away, he died. And at that point, at least according to most of the stories, kind of the stepmother's true colors come shining through. She's not particularly generous or gracious or thinking about how to be equal to the 3 daughters in the household. Rather, she looks at Cinderella as the perfect character to step in the role of servant, because they couldn't afford servants anymore. So here's this extra girl, and what could be better than to have this extra servant? And there's been all kinds of plays on this tale. This is not a new tale. It goes back years and years. So it's been refreshed and it's been retold. Sometimes it's the part of a male boy character. In I think Cinderfella was the version of that. It's been designed where Cinderella, what happens to her is that at the low point of her life, her fairy godmother comes along. And so there are other variants where there's actually much more fairy activity, which are different kind of people with different kinds of skills. And they are almost operating in a dreamlike world because they have gifts and skills that are very different. So in the one version of it, Ella Enchanted, Ella's fairy godmother thinks she's giving Ella a blessing by giving her the gift of obedience. And so when anybody directs Ella to do something, Ella has to do it. She has to drop everything. And of course, in that particular variation, there's all kinds of comic and tragic things that ensue, because if you're simply told, do this, and you have no capacity to choose, can you imagine what that would be like? Can you imagine if that was your gift, the gift of obedience, that all someone would have to do is to tell you? And I bring that up because we live in a time where that's really what's sought. There's a whole part of our world which is really about telling the other part of the world what should be done and how they should behave. There's a state which is having impact across the country where they made a decision about how women's bodies can be treated. And I won't name the state. I'll leave it to your imaginations, and I'll leave it to your knowledge of news. But I, as a male-gendered person, can never go through what is being doled out and what is being ruled as appropriate. Now, I can take umbrage at it. I have 2 daughters, and so I have a particular empathy, a particular sympathy, a particular driving force, which makes me think, would I want it that my daughters are forced into something? And the difficulty is that it's really all on the woman. Even though the genesis of a baby comes from a man and a woman, there's no requirement in the operations of the law that the man ever has to take any responsibility. So, for example, if a woman gets raped in this state, now it's just like, well, this is a gift from God. That would not be a dream. To find yourself as a teenager, as just coming into your sexuality, to be raped and to find that you are having to carry a baby, and that the person that raped you has no responsibility, none. However, if you were to do anything about the baby, it's all on you. Now, what does all of this have to do with community and with dreams? Well, one of my fundamental beliefs is that we are uniquely entangled in communities. No matter how independent we want to be, there's no way that we are ever ultimately alone. So we're in a room right now, but this room was not created by a single person. There's all kinds of people and communities that generated this room. The fact that we're speaking in a room and we're speaking online is generated by how many operations, how many people. You know, there are all kinds of computer servers that are running and making the internet happen. And yet it can be very easy to think that we are on our own. And sometimes some of the elements on the internet reinforce that false narrative. There was a testimony over the past couple of weeks about how particular platforms that are on the internet have not always done the best by the people that are using those platforms. So there are protocols and there are algorithms and there are things that make particular stories that push those stories forward. All you have to do is, you're looking for a yoga place, and then you might get a message about some false information, but you don't know that it's false because it's being shed as good, positive information. And then pretty soon down the track, you're learning about a whole political party that is drinking children's blood and that is selling people into slavery, and how it would be terrible to try to let Medicare or Medicaid put any kind of limits on the cost for drug companies, because drug companies are all just they're in self-sacrifice. All they want to do is give, and they just want to do research. The only side that isn't ever talked about is that's the funding for that they have competed for comes from the government. So it comes from the people who are actually us. Who are that? So we live in a world that some people have characterized as nightmarish. So you heard the story in the reading, and I kind of pushed Michael into that reading, partly because the notion of Elijah and the notion of Elisha are a presentation of how dreams can present themselves. Elijah, the one who was carried off by a chariot to heaven, and I mean it was a big deal. It was astounding. Elisha gets the mantle because it falls off of him while he's being lifted up into heaven. It's not like there was a royal passage. It literally fell off because he didn't need his mantle of the prophet anymore. Because the work of the prophet was done when he was being lifted up. One of the things that happens that wasn't talked about in that reading is that Elijah has a dream. And in the dream, Spirit said, "Go out and stand on the mount before the divine." And behold, Spirit passed by, and a great and strong wind tore the mountains and broke it in pieces, the rocks before Spirit. But Spirit was not in the room. And after the wind, an earthquake. But Spirit was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake, a fire. But Spirit was not in the fire. And after this fire, the sound of a low whisper. And when Elijah heard it, he wrapped his face in his cloak, and he went out and stood at the entrance of the cave. And behold, there came a voice to him and said, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" And Elijah said, "I have been very jealous for the divine of hosts, for the people of Israel have forsaken your covenant, thrown down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword, and I, even I only, am left, and they seek my life to take it away. So in that story, you don't know the dire circumstances in which Elijah had fallen. He was hiding out because he was an outlaw. He wasn't hiding out because he was scared he had a responsibility. He was hiding out because he knew his responsibility made him unpopular. Sometimes our dreams make us unpopular. Sometimes a response to Spirit's call can generate some unpopularity. Typically, in the stories of the prophets, these were not the guys that were heralded when they came into town. It's like, whoa, we've got the prophet visiting. I'm so excited, the prophet is here. When the prophet arrived, people were like, oh crap. Oh my gosh, we have been found out. Now, how do any of us feel when we're found out? Or are we like, oh, I'm so relieved. I'm finally, it's finally known, it's finally revealed what a yich I've been. And I have a chance to turn that around. Praise you. Oh, beloved prophet, thank you for coming and showing me the errors of my ways. This is just awesome. Elijah knew that being a prophet was a dirty job, and that somebody had to do it. And he was alone in his cave, even after he had been successful, even after he had let the king in charge know that what they were doing was wrong, and God had smote. I'm not really sure of the verbal tenses of smiting and smoting, but I'm going to go with had smote. God had smoted, or there was, he was smoten, he was struck down.
He wasn't smitten.
By the, no, we know it's not smitten. He was struck down by the power of the Lord. And I say this because we don't tend to understand or think about these stories in the way that they're presented. The way they're presented in a dream. We've become very casual with the notion of dreaming. Dreaming to our mind means one of two things. Dreaming is either that nonsense that our mind puts together when we've fallen asleep, and we're trying to make sense about what these images were, and why is it that we're seeing my great-grandfather, and I'm seeing this kid at school, and they're hanging out together. What does that mean? And some of us just think, well, it's just the mind is processing it, so it throws all this stuff together. So dreams can be dispatched or dismissed as not particularly meaningful. Michael also spoke in the meditation about how dreams may be what it is that we've imagined, what is the high point that we have held out, what is the vision that we've let play in our hearts and come forward. In the song from Cinderella, a dream is a wish that our heart makes when we're fast asleep. And it's a response to the heartaches that have come about. That a dream is a natural response to heartaches. And I would propose that we live in a time that is replete with heartache. Has anybody found themselves in any way, shape, or form troubled by the pandemic that we've been encountering?
No.
So no, and I'm seeing a nod over here.
Yes.
So he's giving me a reluctant yes. So we are in this physical viral pandemic, but that language has also been used to kind of put an exclamation mark on the more than 400 years of the pandemic impacts of enslavement. That a group of people could be stolen from their lands in Africa, put in chains on a boat, sold at auction when they arrived, those who continued to live. And then because of their skin color, their descendants were perpetuated into enslavement. In the story of Harriet Tubman, her owner had promised that he would free her and her siblings. But after he kicked it, his children were like, nope, that's going to cost us too much. We're not going to do that, Harriet. And Harriet was none too pleased about it. And in fact, their plan was to make it worse because they didn't want to hear her complaints. Nightmarish story, right? But Harriet purportedly had dreams and had communication with the divine. And in those dreams, there were things that she accomplished that nobody else has ever done. Not only was she able to get herself free, she then returned from freedom and brought about the release of close to 100 people. And then during the Civil War, she led the fighting so that she could free more people as a consequence of the battle. Meanwhile, we have states in our country that are celebrating the Confederacy. They're celebrating the notion of enslavement is good. And there are people who are arguing today that those people who had their enslaved people taken away should be reimbursed now. So the turnaround is not simply that those who were enslaved should be reimbursed for how they built the foundation of the economy upon which our country rests. Oh, no. They're not arguing that those people who created the foundation, who built the White House, for example, they're not arguing that they should be reimbursed. They're arguing that the people who enslaved others and held them as enslaved people should be reimbursed for the loss of their property. So they're still holding on to this nightmarish notion that you can own other people. Again, I bring this up because we are living in a time where there's crazy ideas that are just running around rampant. And we have devices and platforms that it's really easy to get caught up in this. Like, yeah, I guess if you were a previous enslavement holder and you lost value, you should be reimbursed for that. Sure, that makes sense. What I want to propose is that there are three things that we can do with respect to dreams. We can use our dreams to inspire. We can use our dreams as guides and to guide. And we can use our dreams to transform. So that there's inspiring, there's guiding, and there's transforming. How do we embody our dreams and our community connections? We can forget that no matter how good we have it, that the divine is imagining that still there can be greater good. Life keeps asking us to deliver more good. Are we able to dream big enough to deliver more good? Are we able to withstand the crazy pressures around us? Are we able to withstand the crazy talk that happens to us? Or how do we hold on to our dreams? Now, one of the stories that I'm going to refer to in thinking about dreams is there is a certain one of a character from the Torah a character named Jacob. And Jacob had a whole bunch of sons. And one of his sons, Joseph, was a dreamer. And when Joseph was unabashedly proud of his dreams. So he goes to his older brothers and he's like, you know what? I'm going to rule over you. All of the earth is going to be at my feet and I'm going to rule over you. Now, how do you think that went over with the big brothers? Were they like, thank you, little brother, thank you so much for sharing that. Your thoughtfulness that I know this now makes me feel so much better prepared to be in service and gratitude to you. Thank you. No. The older brothers all made a plot. And one was kind of halfway kind of like, I don't know that this is a good idea. But they trapped him in a well. And then when an Egyptian slave train was coming through, they sold him off. And they took his special cloak that his dad had made for him, the coat of many colors, and they covered it with goat blood so that their dad would think, oh, my beloved Joseph is dead. Now somehow, this is how crazy people think. Somehow they thought, this is going to make Daddy better. Daddy's not going to keep favoring this one so much. But they didn't seem to understand the notion of grief. They did not get the notion of grief. And Jacob entered into a state of grief for a long time. It didn't just go away. But that's not the end of the dreams. The notion wasn't that he shared his dream and it slapped him down. He held on to his dream. So during his enslavement, he wasn't going to be any less than when he was free. How do we choose to be more rather than less in the face of difficulties? Because he was a bright, charismatic character, Joseph rose up through the household. And he caught the eye of his slave master's wife, and she's like, you're pretty hot. You really do things to me. And Joseph is like, you know what? I may do things for you, but I shouldn't. And we shouldn't. And she's like, what? Are you rejecting me? Yes. And he's like, well, no, I'm not rejecting you precisely. I'm just thinking that you're married, and it's a good idea that you stick with your dude and leave me out of it. And she doesn't take to that real kindly. So she accuses him of rape, and he is imprisoned. And again, he's not like imprisoned in like, in a state of, woe is me. This is like strike two, I've really been screwed over. Strike one is I kill my brother in my dreams and they throw me in a well and sell me off. Now strike two is, I'm honorable. I try not to mess with the slave owner's wife, and now I'm back in prison. And this is worse than just being stuck in the well. I'm in prison with all of these people. And none of these people here are all that happy. None of them are all that happy. While he's in prison, he meets two folks who have dreams. And he's got this gift with interpreting dreams. And the first person comes to him and tells him, this is what I see. And Joseph is like, oh, you know what this means? This is awesome. You are going to get cleared. You are going to be brought back into the household. You are going to be reestablished in a position of leadership. This is awesome. Your dream is telling you great things. Now, how many of us want to hear that? So that person is, in fact, cleared and sent back to the household. So one of the other people comes by and says, I had a dream. I'm so looking forward to how my good news is going to sound. And Joseph listens to the dream, and he's not exactly smiling. He's saying, this is going to be kind of hard to hear. But your dream tells me that you believe that you were guilty, and that, in fact, life is not going to get better. Life is going to end. And the guy's like, this is not what I was expecting. You told that other dude that things would be fine. Why am I not getting that? My dream wasn't all that different. Joseph says, well, I'm not the person who gave you the dream. I'm just telling you what I believe it means. Sure enough, he's taken away and executed. And the rest of the folks around Joseph are thinking, wow, that guy's pretty good. 2 for 2, 100%. Not necessarily the same 2 for 2, but it's, he's pretty good. And then, as you may remember in the story, the Pharaoh starts to have some dreams. And he calls in all of his wise folk, and he's trying to figure it out, and nobody can figure it out. And he is getting increasingly distressed. Have any of us ever had dreams that we found distressing?
No.
I used to have one where I was in a car, and I was supposed to be driving, but I was driving from the back seat.
You were very tall.
I was not very tall, but I was trying to drive from the back seat, and it felt worrying. The car is going, and it's like, no, we're supposed to be turning here. We're now in oncoming traffic. This is not good. And it was funny at the time. The person that I was dating said, "Oh, I'm really surprised that you were even in the back seat, that you could see the traffic. I think you should have been in the trunk." So I think your psyche is giving you an advantage because, if looking at your situation, I would have said you were gagged and tied in the trunk, so there would have been no seeing anything and no warning about anything. And that dream did help me do some reflection about how I can use or don't use power in my life. I really felt at the use of others and didn't see how I could have any power. And in the story of Joseph, they kind of run through everything, and finally somebody says, well, the guy who was released said, I actually met with a soothsayer, a dream teller. You might try him. And they brought Joseph out, and Joseph listened to the Pharaoh, and he realized, oh, well, you're going to have 7 great years, you're going to have 7 awesome years, and then you're going to have 7 years that are awful. And the Pharaoh's like, okay, so what do I do? And he's turned to his folks, and they're like, well, we'll just have a good time for 7 years. Woo! And the Pharaoh who's been leading is thinking, well, 7 years followed by 7 bad years probably isn't the best. So Joseph has some other ideas. He's like, save during those 7 years of good. Don't just be hitting the town every night during those 7 years. Save up for the now foreseen future. Prepare for it. And because the other folks had suggested, woo, we're going to have a good time for 7 years, the Pharaoh put Joseph in charge. And so Joseph became one of the ruling agents in Egypt. Dreams show up. And they can inspire. They inspired Joseph's creativity. They inspired him to stand by his character. They inspired the way that he could respond to the world. That even when he heard bad things, he still told it how he heard it. He didn't try to make nice. He didn't try to pretend, oh, you'll be fine. Wink, wink. to the second guy. He didn't say to the Pharaoh, "Oh, that's so awesome! You're gonna have 7 really awesome, great years." Wink, wink. You'll be happy hearing that from me. He was not afraid to be inspired to tell the truth. Dreams can inspire us to tell the truth. And what we believe with the Science of Mind teachings is that we are, as Ernest Holmes described, we are spiritual broadcasting stations. So are we going to spiritually broadcast the truth? Can we be inspired to spiritually broadcast the truth, even when others around us won't necessarily like it? The notion of being these broadcasting systems has been proven in medicine. They have realized that when doctors confer with their patients, they can encourage their patients to draw on positive belief. And that contributes to healing. The doctors who are doing this have better outcomes than the doctors who treat people like lumps of flesh without an independent mind. So let dreams inspire no matter what the content of the dream is. When I could learn to use that notion of I'm seeing myself as powerless, then the inspiration was, but that doesn't mean I have to stay powerless. This is a lesson. This dream here is a lesson to me. And do I listen to it? Do I let it inspire me to respond differently? Now, who has ever had a new dream and the feeling that emerges isn't excitement, it is fear? Has that ever happened? We see a new prospect and we're a bit reluctant about it. And I've talked about this before, that the notion, the tone, the energy of fear is the same as excitement. But part of it is what frame do we give to it? Do we see it as a beast that's going to eat us up? Do we see it as a reason to worry? Has anybody here not ever worried? Okay. Just take a moment, feel that place where worry sometimes hits, and is there a sense of you are really productive? My worrying self is so productive. I'm so grateful that I have this worrying sense. No, it's kind of like a little black hole. It's like you should worry, and did you not think of this? This is another thing you can worry about. Wait, there's more. And let's spend a little more time on it. It's like this little black hole. In the story of Elijah and Elijah got this dream. He was holding out in his cave, and he's like, I am hanging out here. And he gets this dream that tells him, you are going to get a message from the being on high. And in his dream, the being on high is not found in the earthquake, is not found in the fire, is not found in the storm or the wind. The being on high is heard in that soft, quiet voice. How often do we get tricked into thinking these big displays? How often do we find ourselves, Michael had talked about it last week, do we feel like we've got to get a 2x4? The universe is just going to pound us with that 2x4 repeatedly, and finally we might get it. We're only going to need the 2x4 if we need the 2x4. We also are given this constant message, this constant murmur. Imagine if we were to wake up and hear the message, you are enough. You are magnificent. There's a song You are more than enough. You are more than enough. What if we were to start each day with that soundtrack of you are more than enough? Elijah let his dream break him out of staying huddled in his cave, because he got the message that there was somebody who would follow him. And even when Elisha started following him, and Elisha didn't come right away because he's like, wait a second, I've got some stuff to take care of. And what I really appreciated about that reflection in that magazine is there's a thing from the New Testament where Jesus is calling people, and the one guy says, I have to take care of my mom and dad. And the disciples in that story are like, well, he's not very obedient. Remember Ella enchanted in obedience? One of my ministers said, well, what if, in fact, he did go back and take care of his mother and his father, and after he'd done that, he then spent the rest of his life following? You never hear that part of the story. Or you never let yourself imagine that we just think, oh my gosh, he missed his opportunity. He was called and he said, I don't care about the call. How much grace do we give ourselves to imagine that he, in fact, listened to the call? That he did both? How often do we set ourselves in, it's either this or it's this? Hey, come and follow me. You know, we hear the story in the Christian tradition of, you know, the fishermen, they drop their nets and they're like, oh, they're a little bit like zombies. You know, they just follow and they're just obedient. And that story may be oriented towards one of the disciples who was named Peter, who was incredibly obedient because he valued obedience. He valued obedience above everything else. But you know, there are some other beliefs. There are some other values. So the authors of the gospel may not have talked about independence because it wasn't really a big value back in 00001. Woo, independence! I'm going to be independent. I'm going to listen to you, but I'm first going to do this, and then I'm going to listen. Oh, you're going to do both. Elisha followed Elijah through hell and high water. And Elijah kept saying, are you sure you want to do this? This prophetic life really sucks. Are you sure you want to do it? You know, he was really trying to discourage him. He's like, this is not for the weak of heart. And you might be the weak of heart, so you might want to stop it. But no, Elisha kept following. He's like, nope, I'm here. I am here. I'm part of this thing. I hear your dream. I hear you calling me, and you are standing in as the voice of the divine. How often might we be the voice of the divine? How often do we let ourselves believe that we can be an expression for something bigger than ourselves? And when his mentor is carried away, his message isn't like, oh, I'd like an ending like that. That's what I'd like to have happen. He's like, no, I want the action of the divine to come through double of what it came through from him. And in the reading, we heard how he did double what Elijah was able to do as a prophet, demonstrating the action of the Lord through him. So, we've got the notion of dreams can inspire, and we can inspire. Dreams can guide, and we can guide. The third one that I want to touch on is about transforming. Centers for Spiritual Living advances a teaching that is known in most religious, spiritual practices and orientations. That it isn't all just about me. That's not where most spiritualities come back to. You can look through the readings of most religious practices, and there's this notion, this global notion of the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have done unto yourself. So remember yourself, but remember yourself in the context of others. We live at a time when the me is very highly valued. But we can address that valuing by bringing up and transforming the conversation to we. A recent study conducted watching what happened when Christian and Muslim teams were playing each other in the Middle East found that interplay ended up creating a change in attitudes. So instead of kind of this ongoing advancing notion of they're bad, I'm good, there was a greater flexibility. Where might we take action to see and be me and you? I was raised in a particular orientation of Christianity where me was to be dismissed altogether, and it was to be all service to others. But the only problem with that service to the others is that when the me gets run over and depleted, there's very little me left to take care of much of anything. There's a magical thing nowadays, it wasn't known back when I was a little kid, but there's a well-known thing called burnout. Has anybody not heard of burnout? And we know that the notion of burnout isn't just me, but it's a notion that, I've got to remember that I exist. I've got to remember that in order to contribute, I also have to do this magical thing called receive. It's that thing I shared in the reading last week, that there's a vulnerability to opening ourselves to receive. We like to be the givers. There's a certain power that comes with giving. There's a certain sense of vulnerability that comes with the notion of saying, I need help. I mean, how many of us line up on this, line up and say, me first, I want to receive the help first. There are lessons that get communicated in the world. And the lesson that I want us to hold on to is that the transformative power of dreaming is that we can have both and rather than either or. We have the opportunity to take personal responsibility for the world. Yes, it's a messed up world. Yes, there's messed up things happening in it. But we don't have to sit back powerlessly. We don't have to be in the back seat of a car that's driving. Or we don't have to be like that person I used to date said, we don't have to be tied up with our hands and feet and our mouth gagged in the trunks. We can drop that image. We can let the power of the dream show us what's been happening. And we can choose to say, wait a second, where am I giving up my power? Where am I giving up my capacity to speak the truth? Where am I giving up my sense in celebrating and in bringing joy? If I say that Stephanie, our practitioner, has talked about joy being a fundamental element of living, if we don't even hold out for joy, we're never going to get it. If we don't hold out to the possibility that we can be happy, how can we be? Because we've let it go. The dream can transform us from saying it's this or this, and it can transform us into it's this and this. We can let our dreams help us engage in community so that we are able to inspire, so that we are able to guide, and so that we are able to transform. So I have an affirmation for us to finish. It is short and it is easy, so I can do it in one breath rather than breaking it up into parts. So are you ready? My dreams express spirit.
Repeat.
Yes, so my dreams express spirit. Once again, my dreams express spirit. And one more time with feeling and energy, my dreams express spirit. And so it is.
And so it is.
So thank you.
Yes.
I'm giving you your space.
Ah, space. Ah, yes, thank you, Reverend Vaughan, for the idea of inspiring, guiding, and transforming to have that happen by our dreams. 'Cause dreams are powerful, you know, just look at Jacob, or
Joseph.
Joseph, well, little Jacob named Joseph. And the idea of remember me as in the context of others, is that how it was?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's I think a very powerful one. Because sometimes we want to do everything and we are of no good if we, as Reverend Vaughan used the term burnout, if we burn out, we're no good to others if we actually, burn out. We're not good to ourselves or we're not good to others. So, thank you for the inspiring talk. And as I said, next week, it's the third Sunday, usually Reverend Pamela speaks, but she had something come up, so we're switching, so she won't be speaking till the fourth Sunday. So I will be speaking next week. Sorry about that, but that's the way the cookie crumbles. Sometimes we have to be flexible.
You guys are flexible.
And that's one thing we've had to learn, especially in the last year and a half or whatever with
Exactly.
with COVID, to be flexible in all areas of our lives. And so I just want to thank everybody who has tuned in from Facebook or on Zoom. I have to tell a cute little thing that happened. It wasn't cute really, but yesterday I had set up with our account bookkeeper to do a Zoom call with her because we had some things to discuss. And I got so busy at home because what we were doing and stuff, I forgot all about it till I think it was about almost 2:30. And I was doing something, and all of a sudden it was like this. I don't know what made me remember it.
All of a sudden you
All of
did.
a sudden, I said, "Oh no, I missed the Zoom call." But she was flexible. I called, we talked on the phone, and so it got pretty much taken care of. So, but the idea that, oh my God, and I was going to beat myself up, but I was really into what we were doing. And so I want to thank everyone that has tuned in and that keeps tuning in. Hoping you are getting something out of what we are trying to give out. And so I give thanks for this day, for each person here, and for life itself. And as we step out into our lives, knowing that we can inspire people, we can guide them, and we can sometimes transform ourselves and help transform others. It's not all about me. It's about all of us. each and every one of us, to inspire, to guide, and transform each other, to lift each other up.